for our students who are here with us today, we're really excited to have you, and I hope you get to spend some time talking with Dean's Leadership Council members. You may have heard the phrase lunch and learn, and this is what happens at offices when really busy people need to learn new things, and the only time they have to do it is lunch. And so we are kind of turning the tables this time. I know that some of you have been involved where we have had students presenting to the council so the council can learn about what you do. But today we're flipping the table, and the council is going to present to the students. And we've invited 5 members of the council to share a little bit about their careers and their thoughts and advice with you about moving forward. They are a very distinguished group, and in order to save us time, I'm not going to introduce their careers in detail. I'm just going to give you their name and their current job title. And I know that as they share their advice with you, things will come out about their lived experience in their professions. So starting to our left here, Sue Rozakis is the Senior Director of Workplace Design and Development for Google in the Bay Area. Google, the Google, yes.
And yes, I'm still there.
Donna Clendenning is Vice President and Managing Principal of the Buildings and Places Group in Southern California at AECOM. Caitlin Murchison is the Senior Project Manager at DPR Construction. Ray Hashimoto is Vice President of NMH Engineers.
HMH.
Oh, I'm sorry. HMH. And Ryan Jiang is Principal with Letty Madam Stacy Architects. What we're going to ask them to do today is to reflect on basically 2 questions. I'll read them both now, and you might merge them or maybe address them separately. But how are built environment industry trends affecting professional practice experiences, responsibilities, and opportunities? And then how can students position themselves for future career success? And what should students expect as they embark on professional lives as new graduates and emerging professionals, as mid-career professionals, and as firm principals and partners? And so with that, I think we'll just start at one end and move forward. Ryan, would you like to start us off?
Oh, me? I hate starting. Why don't we start in the middle? Okay, I'll start. I'm all right. No, it's nice to be here, and what a fun panel, what a fun time for lunch, and thank you for taking the time to allow us to share with you. So I guess the first question, should I answer one question or both questions at once?
What if we start with the built environment industry trends?
Sure. Okay. So, I guess what I would say is that the trends, first of all, that I think are affecting our industries in architecture and buildings and planning and landscape architecture are, of course, affecting society as a whole and are affecting everything in our lives. So I don't think, first, that the two, are interchangeable. And I think, coming from an architect's perspective, that, it's not really about one thing, it's about everything. At least for us architects, we're generalists by nature. We may specialize in our careers, but we have the opportunity to learn about a lot of different things, and I think that's something that's really special. And what we do really weaves together form and function, space and light, art and science, material and craft, and the world is so intertwined that we get to touch a little bit of all of it. So that's the opportunity, I think, and also the challenge. And we know that the challenges facing our world, our society, are so immense, from climate change to social unrest to everything that faces our lives, our communities, our cities. And as architects, I think we have a really great opportunity and challenge to address those things, to create a more resilient planet, to create more resilient communities, to embrace not only climate change, but cultural change, and to shape all of that in a positive way. So, I think these times really are unprecedented, and it really requires, I think, creativity to address these things. The world is complicated, and I think we need to go beyond, what the things that we have to do, being service providers, contracts, business, making money, project delivery, schedules. All those things are very important. But to go beyond that, I think, is the challenge. To take our projects beyond that, I think, is also the challenge. And the creativity, that's required. So we talk a lot about building beyond the property line, about allowing each project to make more of a difference, to find little ways sometimes for that difference to happen, or bigger ways to create our buildings in such a way that really address the climate challenge ahead of us, the societal challenges ahead of us, and architecture can do so much, I think, in those areas. So I'll stop there, maybe.
Thank you, Ryan. I thought about this question a little bit, and one of the things that popped in my brain are some of the obvious things, right? That the pandemic has changed the way that we work and how we operate, and some of the things that I think in our industry that were lost was the ability to collaborate a lot. And so we set up our landscape studio so that everybody could be close together and be working at a collaboration table and be able to exchange ideas and do those things. And so I think now everybody's looking to be far apart. And even though I'm happy that we're all together here and we can sit in this room and don't necessarily have to wear a mask and feel okay about it is great. But I think remote work is here to stay. And so for the designers, future designers, we have to think about, workspaces and how they operate, and how does remote work going to work into the design of homes where there's an office or something separate. And I love to have people in the office because I think that collaboration is one of the best things that comes out, and the best ideas and the best solutions from collaboration. And if we don't have that for 40 hours a week or more, it is a loss. And so how do you make up for that loss? I don't think I know the answer for that, but I think that's something that's here to stay, and we're going to have to figure out people who are going to be in 24 or 32 hours a week in the office and not full time. So that's when I think something that we're going to have to deal with. There's a lot of new legislation going on to increase density and increase housing supply, and people having knowledge, coming out of school and having knowledge of SB 9 and others that are current are going to be important, whether you're working as a city planner and trying to administer those things, or whether or not you're trying to find a unique way to add a EDU and a junior ADU to a single-family house, and maybe that's in a production house or it's something or in a custom house. But those are things that people are going to want to have, and find those unique ways to increase housing supply, particularly in California and in the Bay Area and all the metropolitan areas in California. So I think that's important. Getting back to what Ryan was saying about designing spaces, with that pandemic, I think we've learned a lot with retail sort of disappearing for a while. I think there's a lot of floor space on the first floor of mixed-use buildings that were supposed to be mom and pop restaurants and stores and a lot of other things that were going to activate the streetscape. And now that that whole stream has sort of dwindled, I think we have to look at flex spaces and how those spaces are going to be designed to take on a whole bunch of different uses, whether it's meeting room, whether it's an external working space. So I think the architecture are going to be looking at those sorts of things to enhance their designs, particularly on the first floor where you want to have a lot of activity. And then we're going to have to design for the new REACH codes, where we're eliminating our reliance on fossil fuels, and what are we doing about making sure that every parking lot can have every single parking space have electric, have EV. And those are things that you have to think about, and it's not only a space constraint or a encumbrance to your parking lot areas, but things like that are all going to be coming down the pike. So I think those are other things that we need to think about in our designs when we're working on projects.
So kind of along the lines of what Ray was saying, I think the pandemic really shifted and modernized the way the industry had to move forward, whether it's how we work remotely and in the office, or whether it's the type of projects that our culture now demands or have dwindled as a result of just kind of pandemic interactions. A huge shift that I've seen in our work is the project delivery type and collaborative project delivery kind of being at the forefront of all of that. 10, 15 years ago, we were doing design build work and we were doing collaborative work, but it felt like we were kind of trying to merge an old system with the new one, and like we were stumbling through that a little bit. I'm seeing on our projects a lot more really intentional collaboration and a lot more having to form a new way of operating and delivering projects. So going from, whether it's an IPD project or a progressive design build or anything along those lines where we truly are one team with the architect and the owner and the engineers, doing things from the very beginning to try to set up a framework for what is the best way to deliver this project, what is the best way to merge a team, and what is the best way to communicate and bring all the disciplines together. Doing things like, really kind of developing the emotional intelligence and the EQ for teams, finding our strengths, discussing our strengths, being open and honest about what that looks like. From the construction side, having to look at what is really a linear trade and process, from scheduling, cost management, wanting to set that at the beginning and then move forward in a straight line through the construction process. Whereas if you, start during a schematic design or conceptual design phase, it's not going to be linear. And how do we teach contractors to move with the designers and move with the users and the clients and the stakeholders and allow that process to evolve the way it needs to while still, helping have that framework but not have it be too structured. So I think, a lot of the way this industry is truly intentionally going now, even though we've been talking about it for a very long time, I think we're seeing a lot better practices of developing good tools and taking a lot of lessons learned and having weekly check-ins with team leadership on all sides for high-performing team meetings, what's working, what's not working, and having those open and honest conversations and pivoting where we need to, and really staying on top of it, and looking at the process objectively, because it's always going to be fast-paced and demanding and costly, and making sure we're making the right decisions and making them at the right time so that we can stay on track and do it, as one large successful team.
I think this one's still working, yeah? Okay, so one of the things that, this is really about current industry trends and everything, and I think one of the things that we can never underestimate is actually we've already talked about it somewhat, but is the impact that COVID did have, the pandemic did have on our industry as a whole, actually as industry, all industries, right? And really, the way I see it is it's kind of affected us in two ways, really. One, in terms of, it really, I think to a certain extent, accelerated technology, right? Mark, you had demonstrated to me how you were trying to teach during the pandemic and utilizing and leveraging technology to its fullest. So I think that it accelerated our use of technology, it accelerated the development of technology, but we used to think of ourselves as a global kind of community, and now that has become even more apparent because more and more in our industry, we are interfacing with people all around the world, and technology has allowed us that to happen. I do remember, 2 weeks ago, I was on a call with people in Australia, which meant that in order for me to be on a call with them, it was 4:30 in the morning for me, right? So the world is shrinking. It does mean that we're going to start to work really odd hours, right? So that particular morning, 4:30 in the morning, believe me, by around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was falling asleep. So it does change the way we work. I think that the collaboration that's required, that Caitlin is talking about, that Ryan talked about, that Ray talked about, we're trying to find new ways to collaborate because technology certainly puts that veil of, kind of like don't turn your camera on, you can't see anybody, therefore, if you're not seeing anyone face-to-face, it's really hard to collaborate. So it does mean that we're faced with certain challenges. As much as we love technology, it does put some impediments in our way. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of what I'm seeing now as really impacting our industry is how much our clients are looking towards their projects, their teams, the people who work for them, and the consultants who provide services to them through an equity lens. And there I'm talking about, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works, looking at all of the ways that infrastructure is provided to the people in the county through a lens of equity, right? Do the people have the same kind of street cleaning services in one area of the county as another area of the county? And we're starting to see that with almost every single one of our public clients, whether it is a county, a state, an airport, higher education institutions, all of that. So that equity lens is now much more forefront. And they ask us, when we're going to be providing services to them, what are your policies towards equity and social responsibility? So that is something that is more and more that we're seeing. I think the last 3, we were required to put statements into our proposals. So it's really important as far as the industry is concerned.
Well, the good thing about going last is everybody has said such great things already, and totally concur with everything that's been said. We spend a lot of time looking at user experience. I've been very fortunate in my career to spend a lot of time at institutions that really focus on the users, and as part of that, we've come up with a lot of great things over the years, and whether it's indoor air quality, it's diversity and equity, and how you provide that in space, neurodiversity, and what that means on how people feel in their spaces. And we've done great things and have a lot of data that supports that. Now the pandemic comes along, and it changes again how we work and how we live and who we interface with, and whole generations of we'll take generations to even understand the impacts of what that means. In the midst of that, we have been working through and saying, oh, well, we're going to keep doing these great things, and now it's a time to pause and say, what really is the future going to bring? It's actually a really cool time to be in school, though I know you had to, the people in school had to work around that during the pandemic, but I think the learnings are going to come from this will really make a difference. One of the things I think we'll see is a focus on value management. There's a lot of things that we have that have been additive, and when you start putting together and how you look at as teams working together with the architect, the contractor, the planners, the engineers, that we can solve things, but it's going to be thinking differently in the future about what we're solving for, and that those trade-offs, that value management in the economy that we're coming up against, how people are going to use their space, whether it's at work, whether it's whether it's home, the combination of work and home together and what that means, and what people do in their off times, and how they entertainment and how that works is all going to be a part of it. So I think it's exciting. It's a cool place to be, but we're not sure where this is going to take us. So you all will be a part of the future, and excited to see that come.
I'm going to maybe
Here, do it.
pause. Pause for just a moment to see if anyone in the room might have a thought to add. We've heard quite a big spectrum of, what we think are trends now that are going to affect, work in the future, and certainly work related to shaping the built environment. We have our DLC members here. We have our students here. Did we miss anything? Rick.
He's a politician, so he's got to.
Always got to say something.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
I'm used to that. So I agree with everything that was said from the professional services, from the design, from the owner, from the user standpoint. I think one of the interesting things we always have to reflect about the built environment is things get built. And the pandemic changed certain things about how we deliver professional services. It did not change how steel gets welded, how concrete gets poured, how dirt gets dug, how roofs get laid. And so I think we now have a bit of a interesting dichotomy we have to deal with, that some parts of our industry are functioning exactly the way they have functioned for 50 years. And some parts of our industry are functioning in a new way that has been recently invented. And I think that's an interesting challenge we have to confront, right? And then the other thing, lastly, I would tell the students is that I want to reflect on history insofar as that we had a 2.5-year global experiment on what do we do when we can't all be together, right? And it was an emergency. It was not a once-in-a-lifetime event, meaning it is always something, right? So we had a depression, we had a world war, we had wars in Asia, we had stagflation, we had oil boom. There is always something in your future that is going to change the way you interact with the world and the way the world interacts with you. And so we have the good advantage that you all will be coming to this world and bringing new ideas and helping those that are used to old ways and not thinking of things in a new way get through these difficulties. So I don't want you to think that the pandemic is one and done and whew, we're out. It's this one and it was now, and there will be another one in the future, and we look to you to fix it because we were busy mucking it up and handing it to you on the way. So those are my 2 thoughts.
You're just going to, dump it on them?
Absolutely.
Now, I know this will take courage, but is there a student in the room who would like to either ask a question or maybe even share a thought about, oh, there we go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Avery. I'm a third-year architecture student. So a few of you talked about how work has changed since the pandemic, and I wanted to ask, with people working in different ways, whether that be from home, in person, and hybrid, how do you ensure that the spaces you're designing are able to be flexible enough to accommodate all those different preferences without losing character?
I'm happy to take it.
So we have at the 2 ends of the table, we have maybe that can bracket 2 perspectives, the client and the designer.
Yeah. So happy to discuss this. I spent a lot of my day talking about just that. And so we have many pilots that are looking at what it means to be on both sides of the camera. And so we're similar to, I always wanted to work at a global company, but, it means 10 o'clock at night meetings, it's 6 a.m. meetings, and people around the world, and then the people even close by, office to office building, right? I mean, in the past, we have a lot of bikes, people would get on a bike and ride over to your office building. Now, they tend not to do that. You tend to just get, jump on a call. It is much more difficult than I think anybody anticipated on what the equity is like on both sides of the camera. People working from home, people working from the office, lighting in spaces. And so some of it is technology driven. There'll be there is technology coming out that is, will adjust lighting in a room when you're in a room, because we've had challenges across the globe as companies on lighting in different skin tones, and we spent quite a bit of time solving for that. And you've seen it if anybody has hopefully you have Pixel phones, and you can see the difference what you can do with the lighting and AI that comes along with that. So you'll see AI being used in different ways, and I think getting out and understanding what the expectations are is part of it. Also, another company, not ours, I actually had a chance to sit in where it had video conferencing, and the camera can pick out each face around a table, so it looks like you're at home. And I actually have some photos I took of somebody in a phone booth with me, and where that we look like we're in 2 different rooms. So you'll see some of it will be technology, some of it will be learning to understand how people can best work together, and on your own home side, each person will have to learn how to set their own spaces up to take advantage of that. But it's a big deal, and the answers aren't all there, but they're definitely coming together. Does that answer your question?
Ryan,
Sure. Yeah, a lot of our clients, like Sue, are asking us the same questions, and I think we're all faced with, like I was saying earlier, having to be a little bit more creative and thinking differently about how we come up with these spaces. So, I guess I think that there's something that Sue was saying about an equity of experience in a given social interaction that you are having, whether you are in person or whether you're interacting with someone virtually, and trying to create the physical environment in a way that promotes that equity of experience is very important, to make it not bias, the in-person environment, make it, kind of good for everybody involved. And, I kind of think that there's maybe two things about that. One is really just simply the details. Sue was kind of looking at that a little bit, and the technology involved. Beyond lighting, there's acoustics. It's kind of a huge thing. It's like a problem in my office right now. When everyone's, kind of on Zoom in an open office environment, we've been paying way more attention to acoustics, but it's about all of the technology, kind of in general, and it's about being able to see maybe some of the opportunities where technologies like Zoom have allowed us to make that experience more equitable, such as closed captioning, for example. Folks with different abilities, different neurodiversity, as was mentioned earlier, issues like that, and how the technology can make that experience, a little bit more even for all of us. And then the only other point that I might say is just a diversity of physical spaces, I think, is very important. Not every space, I think, can do everything, especially when you consider acoustics and everything else like that. So trying to create environments that allow for, different, what we call social geometries to sort of exist and make each of those spaces really good for whatever it is that you are trying to do in it, whether you're trying to do work quietly at home or in a private office, whether you're trying to collaborate with someone one-on-one or whether you're having a larger meeting. Each of those spaces will demand something different or each of those experiences will demand something different from the space. And being cognizant of that, reacting to that, I think is something that we're all learning. And, like was said earlier, we're a couple of years into it. The world continues to change, so I think we're all excited to see where things will go, and I think all of you here will be around to help shape that.
And I just add to that, embracing time you can be together, because I think of the difference. I came to my first leadership council meetings on Zoom, and it's hard for me to say Zoom when you have a competitor product, but that being said, it's the difference of being together anytime you can, whether it's hallway conversations, it's learning new things is huge. So it's important for us to be able to reach across the globe. It's also important to make sure you keep those connections one-on-one.
Thank you. Karen Cookland. I just want to build on what you said, because I think the common denominator of everything is the search for innovation. And it's about collaborating. And we were talking about this earlier today, Kuhu and I, that and it doesn't matter if you're in education or research, which is the environment I work in, or workplace, housing, whatever. We're all trying to innovate, and that happens through collaboration. It doesn't happen in a solo world. And so I think finding ways, that's the trick to enable that collaboration. I'll also say that as our office is, spending more time in the office, more and more people are coming back. So there's part of me that's very skeptical that this is kind of a blip. I'm sure people will continue to work from home and have those options. But I also think that if you want to succeed and be a part of that innovation, you have to go in and be with people.
So I'm going to suggest that we shift to the next question. You're starting to anticipate it, as we had hoped. But to maybe be more specific is, how can students position themselves for future career success within this context? And then there's a tendency when we talk with students to talk about, career ready day one. but maybe it's a good idea to be thinking as a student about the early, middle, later phases and the types of pathways that might be possible for you. And so maybe we start at the other end of the table this time. Sue?
I'm not sure how to do that. I'm going to lose my construction degree because I can't put that back in there. So yeah, I would say learning is number one and foremost. And you're all here because you see the value in education. And I'd say the value in education throughout my career has served me really well. And it has been a career that I would never have expected. I mean, I was, my goal when I was in college here was I wanted to have my own construction company. At one point I did for about a hot minute, and then decided maybe I would go work for other people and lead construction in a different way. And so really be open to change, learn, invest, talk to people. Number one thing I find is that I go on a construction site. When I was a young, and I was an estimator actually when I got out of school as an estimator, and I would find the superintendent, talk to the superintendent, get to know what's important to them. They have their pulse on everything on the project. It doesn't matter how much education a person has. Doesn't matter even how much experience they have. It matters what you can learn from each other and bring to that and be better as you move forward. I'm a big fan of that. I'm also a big fan of interdisciplinary learnings. And I think one of the reasons I like working on the other side is I do get to work with architects and contractors, engineers, different types of consultants, landscape, planners. And together we make a better project and better spaces and built environment. And so the more that you can do that, whether you're here and taking classes in other majors, in other the learnings you get from that, and as you go through your career, don't worry so much about, I've been in this job for 6 months or a year, and I've learned this, I'm going to go on to the next thing. We were just talking about how long it takes to be able to, finish a project from start to finish. And when you think about that, you do one project and it takes 3 or 4 years, you haven't learned everything there is to know about the industry in that space. And so I've had students in other universities, not here, ask me, I've been doing something for 6 months, I've learned it, I'm ready to move on. And my advice is to learn more then and spread that learning out and really, really get that. Because I think that very few people probably that are here and the people that I went to school with, Ray and Karen, we wouldn't have thought necessarily we'd be where we are when we were in school, but we've been able to take opportunities and learn from them.
One of the great things, I was here 2 weeks ago for the career fair, and it was the College of Architecture and Environmental Design. And one thing that I loved hearing from a number of the students that came up to us is that they weren't simply, I'm an architecture major or a city and regional planning major or an archie major. They were, well, I'm a city and regional planning major, but I also have a degree in civil engineering, and I'm really interested in transportation planning, right? Or they were talking about being an architecture major, construction management minor, sustainable environment studies. All of this is great because I think that is where our future is leading us to. We talk about the fact that this is a multidisciplinary program. I think that with the world that is shrinking because, the technology is enabling us to shrink, is that there are so many blurred lines now across so many disciplines, and it's not just our disciplines that are here. It was really interesting. I was just introduced to somebody in our firm. She is part of what we call, it's a consulting practice called Strategy Plus at AECOM. She is a licensed mechanical engineer, a certified interior designer, and she's running our change management. She's running change management on projects, right? So you can see how the lines are really getting blurred these days in terms of what it is that you can do with your career. So how can you best position yourselves? I think you're already doing it because you're exploring outside, whatever confines of a single discipline, and learning about other disciplines, whether it is within the college or going outside of the college. There was a great presentation we had from the clubs what was it, 2 meetings ago, and there was the construction management group that had partnered up with the electrical engineering group that had a sociology major with them, and they were going out and building solar panels on the Navajo Nation? Yeah, I mean, I love hearing about that kind of stuff, right? Because once again, it's blurring lines about where we are as far as the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And then, so when you think about embarking on your professional lives, I can't echo what Susan said even more, is like, just learn, be a sponge, learn as much as you can about every facet of our industry, and go beyond whatever your discipline might be, or what your major discipline might be, right? Because what you'll find is that your career can take you anywhere. I think both Susan and I have non-traditional careers, right? Yes, I did do structural engineering for the first 10 to 12 years, although nowadays that'll probably be a 6-month period. Right, with a project that long, and then you can explore other paths, right? And so that was the other question that was asked of me when I was at the career fair, is like, well, what does your average day look like, right? I'm what you would call a 35-year industry veteran. So I was thinking, well, I don't have an average day. I can be doing everything from looking at, I asked my whole team, all of the different disciplines within my team, to put in their requests for continuing education and professional development conferences for the year, right? So I was sitting there reviewing them, looking at, what are the best things that they can look at in terms of strategically placing our firm as well as themselves, for the future. That was one day, right? The second day, looking at, helping to put a team put together a proposal for a major project, right? Another day was, okay, I dealt with a lot of HR issues. So it's like, your day could be so different as you kind of progress in your career. And I think for all of us industry veterans, it's probably the same. It's like, no single day is what we would call average. Oh, okay, let's try this. I realize how far you put it.
Yeah, I agree with everything Sue and Donna shared. When I was thinking about this question a little bit, I was thinking that not much has probably changed for how I think students should position themselves from when I was a student, 16-something years ago, which I think is it's really important to ask questions and get curious and get to really try to understand the industry as a whole, try to network as much as you can, try to do internships as much as you can, get curious about what sparks you, what interests you. There's so many different career paths in the built environment. Like these ladies were saying, it does not have to be a linear experience. You can explore something and learn about a new opportunity and grow in that direction. So I think just really, asking questions of yourself for what interests you, asking questions of industry professionals for what their experiences are, getting to know the companies that are out there. If you know you want to be an architect or a structural engineer or work in the construction industry, get to know those companies and try to get opportunities to know the people within them and see if they seem like your people and if they would be a good fit. Yeah, just go to industry events. And, what has changed in the last 15, 20 years is the ability to connect and how much easier it is to connect with companies and alumni. And, I just think we've talked about it as a group in the DLC, we're available as resources. There's a lot of people in this room who know a lot about many companies in the built environment. Ask questions of them. What types of work does this company do? Are they what they say they are? Just really try to explore and stay open and stay curious.
No, a lot of good information coming out, and I certainly agree with all of it. And I think that the diversity of skills that you have coming out, and I think part of that is a little bit of what we talked about today, was if you have a chance, make sure you go to the office. Be in the office, because the mentoring and meeting and working with your peers just enriches your skill set and really makes you, I think, more valuable person the more diverse your skills are. So I think being in the office, be prepared to, if you want to advance, if you want to be recognized, get into the office. And I know people would like to have 20 hours in, 20 hours out, but it really, I think, is important to be seen and to be heard and to collaborate with people. And we've talked a little bit about that. So I think that's important for somebody coming out of school. And I think the more skills that you have, and if you're not worried about, if you're willing to take on more assignments and do different things within the job, you just become more valuable. You make yourself valuable because you can do a lot of different things. And so I think that's always very helpful to think that way. You may come out thinking, I do want to concentrate on sustainability, but if you come in and have to do something else for a while, I think that's okay. I think that's something you're going to, if you accept, learn about it, and then find something else, I think you just make yourself so much more valuable to a firm or an agency. I think that's important. And we talked a little bit about networking, and I'll tell you a story. I mean, Sue and I connected 40 years after we graduated. So, but we had that connection through school. And I think that's important because if you build your network from day one, the day you're employed, and even before that, you never know when that next job opportunity, that next thing that you might be able to bring into your firm is going to actually cast a light on you, and those people see your value. And I think building a network and having a large network, and I think I'm a product of that, being able to pick up the phone and call an agency and know somebody in that agency or at a firm and be able to talk to them, whether it's about a bill or whether it's about some new design. I mean, those are all things that are valuable to a firm. So I think that's really important. And then be socially and politically aware too, whether you're on the private side or on the public side. Knowing what's going on politically, knowing what's going on in your community is important, and again, makes you valuable to wherever you're at. So I think those are some things that I would point out to new employees, new graduates.
Oh. I guess I got one here. Well, I guess a lot has been said, so I'm not sure what new there is. But I guess I think it's a great question because it makes us all think about, the arc of a career. And I was just reading some article recently for, those of us with life expectancies getting longer and everything else. I think, what did it say? It was like a 50-year career or something like that one might be expected to have. And so if you start, working in your early 20s and you keep on going, that's, a really long time. So to me,
really close right now.
it's scary. It's exciting. I think it's all of it. But I was so surprised. It's like way longer than I would have expected. But it's pretty simple math. But I guess maybe back to the question, and I think every office, every practice, every discipline does it a little bit differently. But for us, and we're a medium-sized architecture firm of about 40, and when we have a new person come into the office at an entry level, we'll have them. It's not the best word, but we'll have them kind of float between a lot of different projects, a lot of different tasks and activities for the first year, sometimes more, of their time with us. So we're a little bit intentional about not having them on one project exclusively and having them see the breadth of the practice, see the different types of projects that we do, be able to help out in marketing and other office tasks and stuff like that, and offer an experience that's fairly intentionally broad. And that lasts for a little while. We're not super formal about it or anything. But then after that, maybe you've got a couple of years of experience under your belt, then, we really ask people to engage in their projects. And we try not to put someone on, a whole lot of projects or anything. They're generally kind of focused on one project. And in an ideal world, they would have the chance to kind of see it from the beginning to the end. And I think Sue was kind of mentioning something about this earlier. It takes a long time, though, to get a building built. And, in that phase, I guess one of the things we try to say is that that you never stop designing through the project phases. A lot of folks will say, well, the project's already designed. We're in design development or construction documents now. You guys had all the fun early on, and what left is there to do now besides draw waterproofing details? And we kind of resist that notion a bit, and I think many in this room would probably agree with that, where, you know, that the idea that design can kind of happen all the way through, and that's something that we try to embrace. And so that if you're building, you know, we don't want the building at the end of the day to look like that rendering that you did in concept design. And for me, coming, you know, when I was younger, that was kind of a new concept to learn and something, you know, new to embrace, especially, you know, as someone who kind of liked making those renderings when I was in that stage of my career. So, you know, I think going from that early stage to that mid stage, and then kind of embracing multiple projects, networking, reaching out, you know, all those other things as you move forward in your career, like just kind of thinking about that arc, and what is consistent about it might be, as was already said, this idea that you're always learning, and that, you know, the built environment, architecture, cities, everything that we do at the end of the day is really a craft, and a craft, you know, takes a long time to get good at. I'm, you know, not there yet myself. You know, maybe in 50 years, maybe I'll be a little bit better. But for all of us, I think, whether, you know, you're 20, whether you're 40, 50, 60, you know, the idea that all of us are always learning at every step along the way is something I think that we could probably all get around.
So we heard some pieces of advice for students who are projecting their futures. Has anyone in the room had an experience where they had an extreme shift in career path? Something that was maybe a little more dramatic, or there's someone I can think of, but maybe.
Thank you, Dean. Phil Cerna, class of '94 MCRP. Certainly, I am someone that whose career did take a pretty distinctive turn. A number of years ago, I had a successful project management and planning firm in Sacramento, and an opportunity presented itself to run for public office. And it was something that my family has been involved with over a number of years. My late father was the mayor of Sacramento and also a professor at Cal State Sacramento. And it's certainly not something that I planned on doing. I didn't study government. I studied planning. But it has turned out to be a tremendous part of who I am in terms of public service. And to serve an elective office like Rick does as well, but to do so in your hometown is especially inspiring, I think, to me. So, but what I was raising my hand for before you presented that, Dean, is I wanted to dovetail a little bit off of what Raymond had to share, because I think it's really important. And when he spoke about engaging in your community, I think one of the ways that you can really do that, that I think will actually prove to be a great asset to you later in your careers, whether it's public or private sector, is serving on boards and commissions. Not just, I think probably most of us would immediately think, well, planning commission, but there are so many different ways you can volunteer and serve. It doesn't have to be an elective office. It could be design review committees. In Sacramento, we have something called CPACs, Community Planning and Advisory Committees. But there are a number of different subject matter specific types of ways that professionals can offer their expertise. And I think that bodes well not just for the community, but I think for yourselves as well, because that's a really good way to understand the political and social landscape that you all will work in. You get behind the scenes understanding, especially if you're in the private sector, I believe, when you are working with public sector staff on those boards and commissions. And I think that actually can help you grow significantly in terms of what you have to offer, whether your profession is architecture, engineering, planning, or all the above. So, thank you.
I'll just, at the risk of, I've got a client sitting on the panel and a couple other clients out in the room, at the risk of getting myself in trouble, I'll be a little bit of a contrarian, I guess. And, I started out, first of all, in full disclosure, I would not be accepted at Cal Poly today, probably knowing the GPAs that you're required. I was a B student who worked really hard. I just wanted to go do houses. And luckily, I was the impatient one. If I worked in that first firm doing houses and was miserable, and I got out. The next job was about a year doing interiors work that was soulless for me. Got out. I think finding a mentor first of all, that would ask me every year, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said I didn't know, and he said that's the right answer. When you stop having that answer, it's time to move on. And I think always questioning, what you're working on, how do you make it better, but being a little impatient, being a little curious is magic. I mean, I'm at that 50-year mark now, Ryan, looking back. If I was giving myself advice, it would be a little impatient and only do things you want to do because you're passionate about it and making a difference in the world. Finding a mentor and travel. I mean, if I could go back again, I would travel a lot more when I was younger because there's so much going on in the world that when you get in the bubble of your office, you don't get to see. And so, sorry if I disagreed a little with all of you. I think if you think about it when you're my age and look back, you'll go, yeah, he was right.
I have a couple things. One is I encourage the students to really get involved with the professional associations, AIA, the Structural Engineers Associations, and get on committees. That's where you really bond with other people outside of your office. You widen your network, and you can find your mentors. And that's, throughout my career, I've been pretty involved with the Structural Engineers Association. And then a second comment is, since we are seeing generational differences, and Sue, I think you commented on the difference between dogs and cats, and maybe you can expand on that. But how is the panel? I'm kind of flipping the question. How is the panel doing things differently because of the generational differences that we see? And maybe Sue, you could explain what I meant about the dogs and cats.
All right, I can talk about dogs and cats. Also, I really love the idea of talking about whether it's office, it's serving your community in different ways, on boards and in different professional organizations. Also, pro bono work. I think has been very, very rewarding. I spent probably 5 years, once a month. I was able to contribute to a local organization, and it meant a lot to me. And I have long-lasting memories and relationships that come from that. So, just want to build on that. We talk a lot about generational differences, and I think you hear about it. It's always been around, but I think it's more and more in the news and in the world today. I'm towards the end of the baby boomers, but I'm still a baby boomer. And my son, who is a millennial, actually took courses and got as a minor in contemporary leadership when he was in school, and he was studying it back 15 years ago and talking about the generational differences. And I thought it was really interesting. So we spent a lot of time at my home talking about it. Also at work, because we have a series of different generations and how people work, and noticing that it is understanding the user is part of that, is understanding not only the different types of personalities, introverts and extroverts, but also how they've grown up and what they're looking for. And so I was having conversations with my son, and he was comparing baby boomers to dogs. Very loyal. What can I do? Give me more. I'll do anything for a pat on the head. Throw the ball at me, and I'll keep bringing it back to you. And he was comparing. And it's my son. This is my son. I can put you in touch with him if you have any questions. He was comparing Gen Zers to cats, and he said basically they really are are used to being in their spaces. They think about spaces a little differently. They don't need to be in one space all the time. With work, they're happy to, and again, this is a broad, it's a broad brush. It's not everyone, but they see a lot of people on social media. was thinking there was no social media when we were in school. There were no cell phones. So how we got information is very different than it is today. And when you think about the ways to get information, and you see people who are very successful at things like YouTube, good, keep going with that, and also Airbnb, and you can make money in different ways than how it was when we got out of school. When you went to your job and you did that, and you took a career path. And so it's understanding that the opportunities are very different today, and how we work towards that is something we spend a lot of time on moving forward. And you know what? The other thing we talked about is that there's a difference in also where you live and how you live, and the amount of stuff. When I was growing up, things were passed down generation to generation. And I will tell you, while I didn't want all of my parents' things, my kids sure as heck don't want any of my stuff. And so it's understanding that and how that fits in it as well, because how people live and how they move and where they move to is good. It's interesting, and I think a lot of opportunity for all of you to have experiences. I didn't get to study abroad when I was in college. I worked for one company all 3 summers and as an internship. There was no way to really find out about it. So avail yourself of the knowledge that's there, and you'll do really well. Anybody else has generational conversations?
I want to just mention something. Actually, it's related to what Phil was saying and related to what Michelle was talking about, in terms of serving on, and getting involved with your community, right? And in organizations, and then getting involved with professional organizations. I would advise to get involved in both, because one of the things I did a few years back was I sat on a bond advisory committee for my local school district who had passed a bond, and they were doing a bunch of school construction. So you're sitting on a committee with a lot of people who are not in the AEC industry, and you would be very surprised, and you have to learn a lot of patience because they don't understand how things work in our world, right? Whereas the difference in sitting on a professional organization, whether it's CEOC or AIA or anything else, is you are sitting on a board or a committee of all professionals and a related industry. So it's a different kind of thing. And Caitlin, I love the thing you said about finding your people. It's the best way to find your people. Serving on a community organization teaches you patience, a lot of patience, right? So I think you've got to do both in your career. And then in terms of generational, I'll just give you one funny story. So I was sitting in my office, and I was talking to another person who had come down from our San Francisco office, and she was talking about, you need to meet so-and-so, he's one of our new mechanical engineers. And I think he lives in Santa Monica. And I turned to him, and I was talking to him, and he goes, I know you. And I'm like, uh-oh, right? So here's a kid who apparently, I did finally recognize him, but he had gone to school with my son. I drove him to Little League practice along with the rest of the team, right? So talk about generational differences. I'm thinking, but I haven't seen him, since middle school or something, or high school. And I was thinking, wow, it's a small world, right? So now I'm seeing him, and he's a professional, right? And he's got his degree in mechanical engineering, and it was just really kind of interesting because I'm a baby boomer too, right? So it's like Gen Z and the baby boomers, right? It's kind of fun.
First of all, I want to. You can hear? It's great that there's a diversity up there. And one of the things I think about when I come to these, because we're being looked at, okay, what kind of advice are we supposed to be sharing that helps this college do what it wants to do? And I'm thinking, how do you get the students ready day one, which we're famous for, and what do you do today differently than when I was going here? And you're talking about 50 years ago. I graduated in 1971, and I was working for a lot of the time before I graduated in 71. So definitely over the 50-year mark, but I was trying to answer that question. And one of the things that was really helpful for me, and it's an asset that's here, was I was lucky enough to be in the experimental lab when we had to pick what we were going to do for 5th year. And so Don Coburg and James Bagnall were the teachers here, and they were basically formulating their book, The Universal Traveler. And that book has done so much good for me because it's all about creative problem solving. And you're talking about the changes that happen, the changes you can't predict, right? And I'm thinking, what do I tell my own kids about how to survive a recession like 2008 or some of the recessions that happened in the past? We're not sure if there's a recession coming, and how do you survive that? But I'll tell you, my life would be different if I hadn't had that creative problem-solving approach. And I remember sitting in a meeting, I was on the president's cabinet, and I had just gone through a breakup, and I was trying to see how I win this woman back, right? And I said, how would I approach this if I used that creative problem solving? And I came up with a whole plan. I wasn't paying as much attention to the meeting as I should have. I implemented the plan. We've been married for 28 years. We have 3 kids. It worked, right? So I'm just saying that you can use these skills you're getting here not just to design some really cool projects, but to design your life. And I encourage you to do that. And that book, if you don't have it, get it, because it's terrific.
The bell rang, and that means that we're all off to our studies and our classes and for the DLC, our meeting. But I wanted to ask you all to please join me in thanking our panelists. Thanks to the students for coming, and I hope that you walk away with the name of at least one DLC member. We have a little time to mingle for those of you who are available to stay. We'll be meeting next door, the DLC only, at 1:15.